We're getting back to classics, okay? When I started this channel, not talking about the reaction dog I used to do, but when I started this channel, my entire goal was to create commentary where I walk around my room with my schizophrenia and ADHD and told you about a game that I liked. We've gotten far away from that. I bought a green screen for $250 that I don't use anymore. Today, we're talking about Flintlock, Siege of Dawn. It's just okay. The coffee, and also the game. Let's talk. I don't think there's any one thing that I would say limits it, but we're going to go through the aspects of any game that I think is important, which is environment, which could be like environment, location, stuff like that, gameplay, and then story, if it's not like a multiplayer shooter or survival or something like that. So let's get started with the story, and then we'll go from there. Flintlock is in a post-apocalyptia where the Confederacy or Confederate soldiers or what have you have been fighting off the undead for like a decade plus, all right? I'm sure somebody will correct me, but I'm pretty sure it's a decade. All right, come at me, joust me in the comments, you bitch. In this mystical world, you play somebody who somehow accidentally releases a god from that capture, or from it's a literal screen, and then you just shoot it with a gun, and it's like, I guess I let them out, so pog me. From there, your team gets slapped around heavily, and then you meet another god that's willing to help you put away the rest of the gods and send the dead back to where they belong. And his name is Enki, and he's a god, and we don't know what god he is. You can guess, like not 30 seconds into the game, you're gonna pretty much know, oh, that's about how it goes. I'll say the story for this game is fun, it's engaging, and it's good. I enjoyed the game the entire way through, but I will say as far as the story goes, pretty predictable for a lot of it, and honestly, the ending was also kind of predictable, which is fine, right? A game doesn't need to have the most complex story. It doesn't need to have the largest world building. Sometimes a game just needs to be fun, and the story was, it was pretty good. So let's get on to the gameplay. The bread and butter, the marinara sauce on your sausage pizza, extra sausage. Gameplay in this game is pretty good, all right? It is a Souls-like game, so naturally it's hard to not compare the game to every other Souls-like game, right? Because every time a game does try to make the attempt to be Souls-like, for me it's always a concern, right? Because I think this could be a good game, or this could be a game that softens my penis to such an extreme that it really does become a wet piece of spaghetti. But it was pretty good for the most part. Admittedly, the combat does take a little while to get used to. I never really perfected dodging at the correct time. I don't know what it is. Like, it felt like a lot of enemies were leading attacks, or they would attack and then you would dodge, and they had like a really long like track time. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but that's what it felt like to me, right? And you know, I feel like somebody's gonna be like, this is just like you when we were talking about the Puritascent Knight. You can jump the flames. Get This gives you 3 classes: steel, black powder, and magic, I suppose. It's more like, I guess it's magic. Should I turn on the lights? Utterly pointless choice. Combat is pretty fun, I would say. For the most part, like I said, it did take me a while to get used to it, but the parrying system is way simpler and the openings are way larger than on any Souls game. I found parrying to be very difficult in a lot of Souls game because I'm lazy and I couldn't be bothered learning it, where I was learning parrying pretty quickly. But I would also say that unless you want to just like beat like a red oak or a stone wall to death, learn to parry in this game, because it'll help you build up the magic that opens up enemies and bosses to counterattacks, or like criticals, if you will. Besides that, I suppose a quick jump into enemies. Most of them are repeated throughout the game, as is expected from a game that goes for 10 to 15 hours, and that's with full exploration around 15 hours. I did it 3 to 13.6 hours, which makes me kind of a speed runner, or not. Don't worry about it. These enemies are repeated, and it's naturally the same enemies all the time. You've got your undead normal guys, you've got your rebel normal guys, you've got your knights normal guys, you've got your ranged explosive, all that kind of stuff, right? There's not really any reason for me to like prattle on about enemies, because they are kind of just the same enemies every time, and that's okay. I've been fighting this entire time, by the way. On the back of gameplay and combat, before we get into locations, let's talk about bosses. Welcome into the corner. Let's talk about bosses. Bosses in this game are few and far between. Yeah, there's many bosses, and you'll go and like free a village and fight like a boss, or you'll find like a big floating crystal in the sky and that's a boss, or you'll find like a side mini boss who turns into a regular enemy later. Again, a very Souls-like thing to do. I'm so sorry. I'm such a rude boy. So as you traverse this land, you're going to fight some bosses. These bosses are mostly gods. I think there's 4 in total if we're talking about actual bosses, which I think is a nice round number. And some people might disagree with me that 4 bosses isn't enough. But if you have enemies, locations, quests, and storylines, then I don't think you need to have too many bosses. And I think having less bosses actually is more impactful in the long term, especially since main bosses are gods that Enki is intimately aware of.
I kill Ramuha when we get to her.
Quick as you can. Back of the head or straight to the heart. No one deserves to suffer.
Which is kind of cool because the storyline, though I think is predictable at moments, is actually quite good. And the bosses themselves allow you to gain further insight into Enki himself and his role in this like incursion of the undead. Let's talk about one of the things that I love about this game the most, which is 2 things: locations and the way that they did the economy. Let's talk about the economy. You have what they call reputation, and reputation is built up over fights, it's built up over quests, it's built up over bosses, naturally, right? And I know what you're saying. Rheezzy, why are you telling me something so goddamn obvious, all right? You piece of shit. Where did you get your shirt? And I'll never tell you. Also, because they're really easy to find. In this game, they decided to go for something a little bit different as far as the economy goes. So as much as I don't seem to be able to make sense of how reputation would be a tangible number to be able to hand over to people, it was never indicated as like an actual money, but it allows you to sort of buy services, pants, well, khakis and polo shirts, right? Because you're getting ready for that big wedding and you don't want to spend money to rent a tux, all right? That's real shit in this game, by the way. Not the part about the wedding, but the part about buying clothing for reputation. In this game, the further you don't get hit, it shows a multiplier up in the corner. I'll show it right here. And while that multiplier is increasing, this will also allow you to get more bonuses. So as you increase this multiplier, you might go, heck no, I'm out. And then you will cash it in for like however much. You get more for bosses and mini bosses and bigger bad guys. But ultimately, the idea is that the longer you're not hit for, the more chances you take, the more payout you can have. And while there is kind of a limitation on reputation itself within the game, I do think it's a really cool way to economize and gamify the economy itself. So I think that's really awesome. And I thank you guys. You did a great job. Also, I know it's absolutely stupid to go over to twitch.tv/Rheezzy if you want to see me play these games live. Let's talk about locations, traversing, exploration, and all that. Within this game, I think it at its absolute peak is a great game for exploration, right? So you have like, I think 3 areas. All 3 areas are extremely exploratory, or you can explore either vertical or horizontal. When you get further into the game, the ability to traverse through these like portals that open up when you touch skulls allows you to go back and forth through areas with ease without traveling to like camps and towns, which is really, really cool. And for this point, when you do find weapons or grenades or armor, it feels really, really awesome to have traversed and explored to gain that. And the fact that the game does allow you to almost bullshit your way up hills as if you're like a horse in Oblivion, it does allow you to explore almost infinitely. Rarely did I run into invisible walls because most of the time, if I could see a place, I could usually get there one way or another, which was really, really cool to me. Where do we land? The game itself is really quite fun. And like I said, it's inspired by a lot of genres, which I find to be kind of, you know, awesome. I like games that want to push their limits, but also sit within their own valley. And for that reason, I think the game deserves a lot more love than it does. And there's nobody on my Steam list that actually owns the game. And that could be because the game is available on Xbox Game Pass, but I like to think that a game deserves more than whatever small little bit of money that comes in from having the game on, you know, Xbox's horrendous Game Pass system. But to that point, the game did come out at like $55 Australian. I paid $45 because I pre-ordered it, I suppose, like a couple of days before. I got like 10-15% discount. So is the game worth it? I think if you like Souls-like games with like adventure, open world exploration, absolutely. I think if you're a bit unsure whether or not you should buy it, maybe see if you can get Game Pass for like $1. But yeah, I think the game is pretty fun. It was made by the guys who did Pacific Drive, which I think Pacific Drive is fantastic. And the fact that they pulled out such a great game, as well as putting out a game like Pacific Drive, neither of them fit. for this developer. Like neither of them are the same, and they're in completely different genres and playstyles. So I think it's cool that there's a developer that's just kind of producing unique content, and it's different each time. So it's awesome, and the developers and publishers, awesome, good job. I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for checking out the video. Hopefully another one next week. I'm trying to get back into the weekly uploads because I was in this weird place where I was playing Call of Duty for like 3 hours every night for the past 2 weeks, which is so bad for your mental. So I uninstalled that. But I might do a video on reviewing Call of Duty if I feel like having a pipe bomb put into my mailbox. But remember, guys, time is also a resource or something. I don't know, man.